Today we're going to work through this process from the creation of your own original music all the way to the recording, the marketing, the publishing, the copyright. Basically, we're going to take that journey from your original song all the way through, and we have some wonderful people to help us with that. So I'll give you a quick introduction. We have Dr. Fabio Augustinis. Dr. Augustinis is the Assistant Professor of Practice in Commercial Music at Texas Tech and a fabulous drummer. He coordinates the commercial music programs. He's presented at esteemed conferences, the Jazz Education Network, the International Conference and International Society of Jazz Arrangers and Composers. He's been a featured soloist, guest artist, and clinician at the Gene Harris Jazz Festival at Boise State. He's a recipient of the Eleanor Stribling Award for Excellence in Jazz Studies, which he received in November of 2020, and the Sarah and Ernest Butler School, at the Sarah and Ernest Butler School of Music. Also, he's just an incredible performer. I've had the privilege of playing with him a little bit, and if you like jazz, this guy can kill it. And with that, he's featured on over 30 commercial albums. So he's a wonderful, wonderful speaker to help us with this event. And then we have Amy Faris, who's the Assistant Professor of Practice in Commercial Music and Songwriting at Texas Tech. She's a composer, songwriter, pianist, recording artist, arranger, and of course teaches songwriting, so a little bit of everything. She's toured and recorded with numerous rock bands, performed with really incredible artists like Mac Davis, Joe Ely, and Terry Allen. Her music has been featured on radio, film, television, including 24 Frames, Click, Behind the Curtain, and Sound on Tap. In 2023, Amy and her husband Scott Faris, who many of you might know, they composed original music for the silent film Metropolis, and that 2.5-hour score, which was entitled Metropolis Electro, features diverse genres from an ensemble of 24, sold out its live performances, garnered critical acclaim, and for this accomplishment, she was honored with the 2015 YWCA Woman of Excellence Award in Arts and Culture, which is pretty incredible. And more recently in 2024, Amy and Scott received the 2024 Luca Catalyst Award for their contributions. So let's give a hand to our wonderful speakers today. And if I haven't mentioned yet, they have a bunch of incredible music that's available if you want to look it up. So you can find Amy's work at amyfaris.com, as well as streaming platforms like Spotify, SoundCloud, Apple Music, and others. And you can see more from Dr. Augustinis at fabioaugustinis.com. My name is Dr. Jonny Verbeten. I am the Arts Education Coordinator for Lubbock Cultural Arts Foundation, and as Stacy and I like to joke, we have the most fun job in Lubbock. We get to hang out with musicians and artists all the time, and we really are here to help you guys succeed, and so we value your input, and really, whatever you need, come contact us, and we'll see what we can do to help you out. So with that, I think we should get started. What do you guys think? All right, let's do it. Okay, so quickly, how many of you guys are songwriters? I saw a lot on the forums. Great. Okay, wonderful. So maybe we've all had that moment where we're working on our original music, our composition, and we have that aha moment. We say, okay, this is going to be a good one, right? So the first question I'm going to kick this off with is, you have that original song. How do you know when it's ready, when you have something complete that you can take to the studio?
I personally am a perfectionist, so I never know if something's ready. But I find that if I play a new song for people, it helps me kind of edit and figure out what's good and what doesn't work. Even if people don't give me that much feedback, I can tell, like when I say a certain line and every time it just feels weird, then I know to work on that line. So play it for people, and if people go away humming it, you know you have a catchy song, right? Or if people say, hey, when are you gonna record that song? When's that gonna be out? And they really like it. That's one of the ways that I know.
Yeah. Another way would be to maybe record your song at home, even using your phone or whatever resources you have available, and then showing that to people that you trust and see, and gather some feedback from them. Another thing too is to consider how you're gonna bring that to the studio. So kind of brainstorm on the format that you want. Do you want just, voice and guitar, what instrumentation you want, what type of arrangement you're going to have, what is the finalized form that you're going to have for that tune. So like trying to brainstorm some of those elements will help you once you plan to go to the studio. But to me, I try to, everything I create new, whether it's a new tune or it's, I'm a drummer, so I create like something that I'm playing that I enjoy. I try to record that, not only for me to remember what I created, but also for me to kind of reference and have some perspective on what I'm doing,
Yeah, that's great. And you bring up an interesting point about instrumentation. So let's say you have this song. You do feel like it's ready to go. Now what? You're going to play it with a band. Do you have your own band to play with? Or are you interested in maybe playing with session players in a studio? How do you know what to do with that song? Let's say you have the outline like you mentioned, and you feel like it's ready to go. How do you know how to orchestrate that, put it together with your band? Do you run a rehearsal with it, or do you take it to a studio and work with a producer?
I feel like it depends on how much money you have. Right? Because often when you're just starting out, like band members are pretty cool about, we play for enough money to buy a pizza afterward. Right? I don't know if that's still the case. It was when we were starting out. So that's one way to do it. I'd say if you really want to perform a lot, yes, have a band. If you want a vehicle for your music to get out, I've formed bands just because I was writing stuff and needed people to perform it with me. But the studio is a viable option too, especially if you're just getting started, if you have lots of money. Or Texas Tech has a free recording studio for students.
Thank you for mentioning that.
So there's Crossroads, which is in the library, and that's a free resource. Session players are great. If you really have a vision for what you want, then a producer and session players can help bring that about, because you're the boss of session players, right? You're paying them, so they have to kind of do what you want. I mean, generally.
Yeah.
So I would say that it really depends on your project, because if you're just, say if you create a song and you were singing it and you're playing maybe guitar or piano with it, right, and you just want to record it in that format, you don't have to hire session players to do it or even form a band. But if you want that to be, arranged and you don't know how to start out, it might be helpful to get someone to help with the process. The thing to me, the difference between hiring people to record your materials or having a band is how much control you're going to have over what you're creating. If you're putting together a band, we are assuming that everyone in the band will have the same weight in the decision-making process, or should have that weight. And that can be tricky because sometimes people want to go in different directions with their artistic choices, and also like the logistics and how they see the project and all that. So if you are putting a band for one of your projects, my recommendation is to get people on board that are kind of in the same mindset as you. So if you are a full-time musician, for instance, I'll give you an example. Like if you're a full-time musician and you want to invest a lot of time to put together the repertoire and have someone else who has, like a different job and they're just doing that on the side, that's not going to work really well together, because they're not going to, you and this other person will not have the same time and the same mindset to invest in a project like that. So making sure that you have people with kind of the same vision for the project is important when you're putting together a band. On the other hand, if you hire people, if you have a project under your name, first of all, you're going to have your name on the marquee. Sure. Meaning like I'm putting out music that's under my name and I'm hiring people to be side musicians to this project, right? So then all the weight, all the responsibilities on you to hire people, and sometimes you need to make a budget, make sure you have money to pay people, make sure you have a plan for things to happen, smoothly. So I think hiring session players, if you're starting out, it's kind of, a big step. So we'll just start smaller first and start small and try to record a few of your tunes the best way you can. And then if you see that that's worth investing more, then you should, reach out to people and see if you can hire them if you don't have a band already, But that would be kind of my general thought regarding session musicians versus having a band,
So let's say you do have a band, you've got the song, you're excited to get into the studio. Let's talk about the rehearsal process. You know, how do you conduct a good rehearsal? I was curious about your thoughts on writing out charts versus teaching people by ear. And really, how do you know when the band is ready to record an album or an EP?
I don't think you ever know if a band is ready, right? To record an album or an EP. I think, again, it depends. To me, the pre-production part of whatever project you're undergoing is the most important part of it all, because it will kind of tell you which direction or which type of pathway you're going to follow. So I'll give you a couple of examples. If I have a band, it's a quartet or a quintet, and I want to go to the studio, I would need to understand if I'm going to record everything live. Mm-hmm. If I want to do like each instrument separately, if I'm starting with drums, then bass, then guitar and keyboards and vocals at the end. And, you know, because the time will be pretty different depending on the type of recording session that you're going to have. So if you are recording everybody separately, that means that you're going to need a certain amount of hours for each one of those instruments to record their parts and then put everything together afterwards. So it requires more preparation. You're going to have backing tracks or you know, guidelines. So these people, like if your drummer's coming in to record first, you're going to have to hear something as a reference, as the reference track. So you're going to have to produce a reference track, go to the studio, which is a totally different process than just getting a live band. Mm-hmm. Go to the studio and record everybody live. Maybe you have vocals edited at the end of the process, but having everybody playing live will save a lot of hours in the studio, but it can also go wrong if you don't know exactly what each part entails. Mm-hmm. So it all, to me, all depends on the type of project you're having and how much time you're going to spend in the studio and how you're going to plan for those things to happen smoothly. So that start kind of in the pre-production part of it. Once you create a tune and then you start scheduling rehearsals and things like that. To me, the more organized things you have, the better the project is going to be. So, you know, it's good to have that kind of creation process at the rehearsal stage when you're experimenting with things. Maybe you're changing chords here and there, adding a new section to a tune, doing all those things. To me, the days of doing those things in the studio are gone. Mm-hmm. They're over. Like they're, you know, back in the day, maybe until the 80s, early 90s, that was a thing. Like, you know, bands would go to the studio and spend a month in the studio just experimenting and recording things and patching things together. I don't think that's viable anymore, especially if you're starting out. It's too expensive to be in the studio for several weeks or, you know, even several days just to experiment with things. So I would say have a plan. Make sure you know how you're going to record that, what the instrumentation is, what type of arrangement you want, and then save the experimentation part for the rehearsals. You know, whether you're teaching people by ear or like trying to, you know, change chords or whatever it is, or if you have really good charts created, do that at the rehearsal stage, not in the studio. That'll be my recommendation. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I would say be as prepared as you can, because if you do go to a professional recording studio, you're paying for the time, you know what I mean? So make sure your band is tight and that you have all the parts down. That's very important. I would also say, as far as a charts are really useful, but I would suggest that before you get together to rehearse, you also have like even a voice memo recording or something of the song to give to your players. So I think the most successful probably is looking at a chart and listening. I think those two kind of go hand in hand, because you get the vibe of a song from listening, right? And if there's a specific solo that you're supposed to play or something, that may not be written out on a chord chart, right? That's something you need to listen to. Yeah. Also, even if you're prepared, leave a little room for magic. Yeah. My husband's a producer at Amusement Park Studio, and sometimes just ideas come up when you're working in the studio. And so leave room for that. Do be prepared, but there's room for that too.
Yeah, that's a really great point. There's something magic that can happen in the studios sometimes, and you don't ever want to be so prepared that you miss those moments. So on the topic of the recording studio, then, you have your song, you're in the studio. For those who haven't been to a recording studio. Can you guys give us some kind of idea about what it's like to be in a studio, any kind of etiquette people should know? We've talked a little bit about preparation, but any thoughts on how to behave in a studio and what that experience is like?
Probably just don't go touching all the guitars and stuff and taking them. I don't know. I think that before you even start a recording or a process with a producer, that you need to sit down and have a talk about what to expect and about what to expect as far as the process of recording, whether you're going to do first, if you're going to lay down bass and drums together, and then you're going to add guitar, how that's all going to work, and a cost. You need to have an idea of the cost and of when that money is due. Like, is it due as soon as you're through recording? Hopefully, right? Yeah. Or, yeah. So you need to have talked all that out beforehand.
Yeah. And I'll say that the planning part, again, is so important, because when you're in the studio, you know, the hours fly by. Yeah. So if you're just paying by the hour or even by the day, you really need to know when to cap things off, you know, and say, well, this is what we can get at this point, and then maybe we'll do this next stage at a different time. I've been to many recording sessions that were scheduled for, like, 2 days or 2 periods, and end up being like a whole week of things, and that's not ideal for anybody, because even if the studio's getting paid, they need to kind of reschedule things around that to make sure that you have the studio available. Another thing I would say is work with the producer in the studio, so you know what to expect in terms of gear and tear down. So, for instance, if you want to have an entire project recorded, ideally you don't want to have to go there, record, tear everything down, and then return the next day or the next week to start everything again and have to set up and start from scratch once again, especially if you have a full band, So have things planned in a way that you can use the studio time accordingly. In terms of being a musician in the studio, and this comes more from like a instrumentalist rather than a songwriter. I think the behave in studio and what to expect. I don't know if you have experience being in the studio or not, but to me it's very different than performing live, and that is because you are, first of all, more exposed, because every little thing, every breath, every little thing that you play or sing or say will make to the recording. So you got to be more careful with how you're going to behave as a musician, while you're still leaving room for being creative and figure out things on the spot. But like, so say I'm a drummer, right? So I'm going to go to the studio. I'm going to have to record. If you're recording everything separately, we're going to have to record to a track that was pre-recorded. And I'm going to have to wear headphones for that. Maybe I'll have to have play to a click, right? So I'm in a separate room having to play music to my headphones while I'm playing my instrument here. So the approach to the instrument will be different already, because I'm not listening to things coming from around me, but rather on the headphone. Also, the sound that is coming out of my instrument will be coming through the headphones as well. So even though I'm playing an acoustic instrument right in front of me, I'll be listening to a lot of things in my headphones. So the perception of the music that they're creating is very different in the studio compared to a live concert. So my recommendation would be for you to, if you're in that position of playing an instrument in the studio and you're not only bringing your project to the studio, is to get as much experience as possible before you do like a full-blown project on yourself, and go to the studio. Like Amy mentioned, we at Texas Tech, we have Crossroads Studio that is free for students. If you're a student at Tech, schedule some sessions there, go there, record a few tunes, and see how it turns out. It's important for you to get that experience in studio and how you can, how we behave in studio versus live, because I think that is pretty different in terms of the reference that you get, the sonic reference that you get in studio.
I have one more thing too. Make sure that when you're recording, you're comfortable with what you hear. I tend to be like so nervous when I'm going in to do session work, because, like he said, it does expose every flaw that you have, right? So it's kind of nerve-wracking for me. It's hard for me to settle in completely when I'm in the studio. But make sure that what you're hearing through your headphones is what you need, right? And don't be afraid to ask for less of something or more of something to dial it in just right to where you're comfortable. Even that goes as far as like the chair you're sitting on, right? Or the bench or whatever. Or if you're standing, make sure the keyboard's at the right height. Mm-hmm. Stuff like that is all important to make you more comfortable, I would say.
Yeah, that's, yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to add something to that kind of studio organizational process, which is how you want to leave some space to be creative, but you also want to be prepared when you go to a studio, right? And the amount of takes you're going to record, the amount of repetition that you're going to get in studio, it's not necessarily directly related to the quality of the recording you're going to get. I'll try to explain. So to me, if you go to a studio and play first take of your tune, second take, third take, fourth take, fifth take, sixth take, what's going to happen? You're going to have to go back to the main room to listen to all of those and pick which ones you like. And you're going to spend the same amount of time recording as you spend listening back to all those takes. Yep. So the more takes you produce, the more you're going to have to go back and start listening back and spend that same amount of time just to listen to your tracks back, and then after, again, the fifth, sixth, seventh take that you produce, everything starts sounding the same. Yes. Things don't get better in the studio. They only get worse after a certain amount of takes that you produce. Sometimes it's better to just go in there and fix a little thing here from a good take rather than just try to start from scratch again and produce another take and another take and another take. And that's different from practicing or even performing live. When the more you perform live, things tend to get better. The more you practice, things tend to get better. In studio, things tend to get worse, in my opinion, because after the third, fourth take, there's nothing else left for you to do. So to me, preparation comes in that regard of like making room for you to create things on the spot, but also not overplay in studio. To me, a studio is not a place for you to practice and play, and then having to listen back to everything, and everything starts to sound the same, and you're tired of hearing the same song, and things don't get better, in my perspective, in my opinion.
I think at our studio, the general rule of thumb is three takes, and then you go listen and see how that's going. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then you punch in, which is when you correct little things.
Yeah. And really, if you haven't gotten it right in 3 takes, then there might be a preparation issue. So, as a pianist here, I'll mention something about Crossroads at Texas Tech, is they do have a grand piano there, and that made me think of one other aspect of the recording process, and that's tuning. So if you're going to play the piano, make sure your studio has someone tuning the piano directly before your session, and then likewise, all of your instruments. If you play the guitar, tune meticulously, because if it's out even slightly, you're going to hear that every time you listen to the track for years and years to come. So, okay, so we've been in the studio. We feel pretty good about our tracks. Tell us a little bit about what mastering is and why it's important.
Go for it.
Okay.
I married that. I don't know.
You married that.
Okay, so just to recap things a little bit. So you go to the studio and you're tracking, right? And then after that, you have your editing process, which is if you have to punch something in or just to correct things here and there or just to edit some things with the tracks, that's kind of in the editing process. Then you have mixing, right? Getting a good sound out of what you recorded and making sure you have like your cues, EQs in place, maybe you compress a little bit of track. So getting a good sound, adding reverb, all that stuff happens in the mixing process. And once you finish that, I mean, this is just a very broad, if we talk about mixing for hours and hours. After you finish that process, it comes into play what we call mastering. And this is kind of controversial because a lot of people don't even consider that a separate process anymore, even though it's so important. So you're going to finalize what you've done in the mixing process. So once you do the mixing, you're still doing all separate tracks, right? You're treating the instruments separately and all together. Once you do that, you can export that as a track as a stereo audio, left and right. So that's just a stereo version of that, and then you're going to treat all tracks as one product. So say if you're putting together an album, you're going to make sure that the tracks are leveled up. You're going to decide how many seconds or how much time you have between all tracks. You're going to make sure that they're ready to be placed on, if you're releasing the tracks digitally, you're going to make sure that they are ready to be placed on Spotify, Apple Music at the level that they need to be. So it's basically like your finishing process when you make sure that everything is at the same, in a cohesive way, like everything sounds the same, everything sounds close, and you decide the volumes and everything that you want to do. And also, there's some room there for you to find like fine tunings of overall, like global frequencies, for instance. So like you say, oh, in the mixing process, we thought that the bass was super present, but it's actually not that. Maybe the low frequencies are not as present during this process, so we just give it a little bit of a boost. So in the traditional way, there are studios that just specialize in mastering. Usually they are like they're not as big as recording studios. Maybe it's just one room treated very well for sound, for acoustics and stuff, so you can hear all the minimum details for a track or for the album that you're putting together. And maybe Amy can speak more to this, but I think it's some engineers like to have that process separate from mixing. So having someone else mastering a project, that it's not the engineer who mixed the same project, so they can have an extra pair of ears to listen to the music, traditionally speaking. But I also know some people, like starting out, they would do everything with just one person because it tends to be cheaper. You don't have to pay for all these separate stages of your project, separately and individually in a way. So you can find like a package. That's possible too.
So at our recording studio, we send all of our tracks to be mastered by this guy named Fred Kevorkian in New York City. And the thing is, with mastering, he has equipment that we could never afford. Right, and it's just for mastering. So it's truly excellent. And I think the cost for that is like $150 a track. And there's a discount if you do a whole album with him. But yeah, we find it helpful to send stuff off to be mastered.
Yeah, that's a great point. So, and I should mention, a lot of these questions that we have here actually came from you guys in your registration. So first off, thank you to all of you. For filling out those registration forms and providing feedback, because that helps guide our discussion. One thing that kept coming up over and over again was this question, and the phrasing always seemed to say, how do I get my music out into the world? So that's kind of where I want to go with this. Once I have a finished song, it's recorded, it's mixed, it's mastered, well, how do I get that music out into the world?
Go for it.
Well, I think these days it's way easier to get your music out there than it was maybe 20 years ago, right? Because we have what we call the digital aggregators or distributors that can help you with that process. And they're very inexpensive. So like DistroKid, CD Baby are examples of those that you can sign up with them, pay a fee, and then have your music on all those streaming platforms if you're just releasing your music digitally. And then if you want to put together physical products, then you can do that with different companies too, and do physical distribution. Although if you're starting out, I don't see the point in 2025 of hiring someone or a company to do physical distribution of your materials at this stage. But you do want to have a digital aggregator for your music to be out on the streaming platforms, and they tend to be very inexpensive. Some of them charge by the track, some of them charge by the project. Or by the album they're releasing. The only thing I would look for, specifically kind of those very small words that they have in their contract, is if they keep any portion of your royalties. Some of them do. I know CD Baby does that. So maybe you want to avoid that. Maybe if you want to starting out, that's not going to have an effect on the amount of money you're going to collect from royalties at this point in your career. But just keep that in mind, that some digital aggregators will take a percentage of your share in terms of royalties. But it's pretty easy. If you go to one of those websites, it's just fill out a form, you upload your materials, and they take care of that for you. So these days it's very, very inexpensive and kind of easy to do using one of those digital aggregators.
one thing, one thing you'll probably have to do on that also when you're filling out that stuff, which I found difficult, is what 3 artists do you sound like?
Oh, yeah.
To me, that's difficult because,
Yeah.
like, my stuff's really weird and eclectic, and it's really hard to nail down, like, what style I would be categorized under, but that's something to think about. Also, have your mastered copy of your track ready to upload, and you're going to also need the art for that ready to upload, whether it's for a single or an album or whatever. You'll have to have all that in place when you go to do that. Yeah.
It's great. What about social media then? What platforms do you guys think are the best for really promoting stuff? And do you think that is the best way to share your music with the largest audience?
I think you have to do it in 2025. I'm not a big on social media just because I don't have the time to be on like a digital like an influencer at this stage, you know. But I do think you should be using the common platforms, you know, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, to you know really advertise the work that you're doing. I think. Now, like I said, I think the social media is kind of saturated in a way. It's kind of hard to get noticed unless you pay for those ads, which can be a good strategy depending on if you're trying to push like a new track or a new project. It's not that expensive, for instance, to run ads on Facebook, depending on how much you want to push that new project, you know. But that might be a strategy. But if you're just counting on organic interaction, then you're going to have to put in the work to make sure that you are feeding feeding your pages regularly so you can get noticed. Otherwise, the algorithm will basically not show your posts to many of your people or friends on social media. So I think it's harder now than it was when these platforms were when they started because of the algorithms. I remember seeing posting something about my daily life on Facebook when kind of I was starting out, and I would have basically 70% of my friends liking my post, right? And now it's like that percentage is down to maybe 5% of them, because they don't see it. They don't see the post, and we get a lot of advertisement, on Facebook. Every 2 or 3 posts that you see from a friend of yours, you see an ad and another ad. So it's harder to be seen, I think, unless you go for one of those engaging Facebook ads or whatever it is. But it's not impossible. And I think if you're starting out, that's the way to do it. That's the way to start promoting your music is through your social media. Maybe, if you have a website, that's another platform that you can use,
I feel like social media is kind of a double-edged sword, because you can get to where you're just feeding content, to the web, and that's all you're doing, and you're not writing music, and you're not sitting down at the piano. So it's really hard to strike a balance, I feel like, with that. One way to do that, if you are trying to get music out there and heard, is that part of your content that you put on social media would be, here's a little bit of a song I just wrote, or these are the ingredients I need to write. I need a candle and a cup of coffee and ugly shoes. That's my process. I write in ugly shoes. That helps me for some reason, right? So I mean, things that pertain to what you're doing.
Yeah, I think that's very important. Like, you're just basically advertising your process. You are not creating content for the sake of creating content, because then you can meet those two things. If you're practicing, or if you are writing a new tune or whatever it is, you're just showcasing what you're already doing. So you don't have to put in extra work to feed the social medias. I think that's key. When I post things, like I said, I'm not a big social media person, but when I post things, it's usually things that I'm already doing, regardless of social media, and I'm just feeding the media with those things so people know what I'm doing, what I'm out and about. Yeah, and especially if you're using the paid promotion. Like, I'll give you an example of this workshop. I've seen that post so many times in the past 10 days or so, or last week or so, on Facebook.
$30.
You see, yeah. Yeah.
Well, let me just do this then. How many people learned about this event through Facebook? Okay. Anybody learn about it through any other social media platform? Instagram. Okay, cool. Yeah, so again, our marketing for this event, we kept pretty low, and so, but it reached out to you guys, so there's kind of a case in point of how we can use these tools for our self-promotion and promotion of our music and art. Okay, so I'm going to pivot just a little bit then. Another question we get a lot from musicians pertains to radio. Amy, I know you've had some television experience as well. I'm curious, if you got this song ready to go, and if you're interested in getting played on the radio, television, video games, other digital media, what's the process of trying to get your music out there on those types of platforms?
That's a really good question. I feel like the people I know who have the most success with radio, it's because of relationships. Jenny Dale Lord, who's an artist whose stuff is played all over the place, I know that she actually hires a radio promoter that has relationships with many stations and gets her music played on there. I think a lot of it, I think with Red Dirt Rebel, part of it is that some of the people who are on air there go to the blue light and they hear an artist and they're like, oh, that's good stuff. Yeah. You can be on the radio. What doesn't work anymore, I feel like, is probably calling a radio station and asking over and over, will you play such and such? I think they don't like that anymore. I did get a song played that I'd written in high school because I had my friends actually call the radio station, and that was a cool moment. And that was the one time that song ever saw the light of day. But I don't know if that is real successful anymore. I feel like it's kind of closed nowadays.
Yeah, especially for original music or something like that. Unless you're trying to promote something that is more kind of niche, like say if you perform in a classical piece, or and you want to be part of a specific station or a specific show that is part of a station, and maybe do a radio interview, that still works. But it's different than radio promotion per se, of having your tune played multiple times at multiple radio stations. That's a different deal, and I do think you need a promoter for that, someone specialized in that area. Yeah.
KTXT as well. I know there are a lot of students who do radio shows on there, and they're often willing to do more local stuff, and especially stuff that students write. And I've had students who are like, I'll play anything anybody gives me. So that's cool because that's a big audience. Texas Tech, we have a lot of people there, so yeah. That's not bad.
Great. Yeah, and the other question I had on this is the topic of outside help. So I've noticed a lot of artists have basically a team of individuals that they build around them to help them with their promotion. And I think sometimes it depends on how big you are. Do you need a manager, a booking agent? Do you need somebody to manage your social media? What are your thoughts on trying to build a team to kind of help with give you help in this process so that it's not the artist basically trying to take all this on themselves?
Okay. Okay. All right. It's really expensive to build a team around yourself because everybody takes another little piece of the pie. Mm-hmm. When you're just starting out, I think you kind of have to learn the skills to do most of it yourself. Maybe you have a friend or family member who's willing to help out in some way, and that's cool when that happens. I'd say that it's unlikely that you're going to get management or something like that until you are drawing crowds with your shows, right? Until you're getting tons of streams and drawing big crowds where a booking company is interested in you, sure. Right? So you kind of have to get the ball rolling on your own, is what I feel like.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Maybe you can hire someone to do a service for you in your process, and that's just like a contractor type of relationship. You're not having a team side by side that you're putting on a payroll and having to pay them, every month or so. That's going to be more difficult if you're starting out. But maybe you're just working on a project and you need a graphic designer or someone to just put together a little, some art for you to I don't know, advertise your music, whatever it is, then you can just pay that person to do that one thing for you. And I think that's possible to do, and you know, it's easier to afford things that way. And again, sometimes you're gonna need that specialized help, like with radio promoter. If you wanna hire someone to do that for a little bit or for a specific project, then you should do that. You know, or maybe we need a lawyer at one point to take care of some of the you know, legalities of your music, then sure, just hire them to do that one project for you. But having people around you on the payroll and creating like a big team when you're starting out, I don't think that's feasible, you know? And it's easier these days to just figure that stuff out on your own. And once you get some momentum, then you can start hiring out those services here and there. And I think that's more, you know, doable.
Great. Well, I have a couple more questions I want to ask before we open it up to the Q&A. One thing that kept coming up on our registration forms are legal issues relating to copyright. So we'll just start nuts and bolts here. What exactly constitutes a legitimate copyright, and do you really need your songs copyrighted?
Okay, so I'll start on this. So copyright, it needs to be original work expressed in a tangible form. I don't know if that makes sense. So, like if I had an idea for an original song that I'm creating, and I haven't written it down or I haven't recorded it yet, so it's not expressed in a tangible form. So I don't own the copyright of that just yet. As soon as I express that in a tangible form, whether I'm writing the chords on the paper or in the lyrics and the melody, whatever it is, or I'm recording, then it means that I already created the copyright for that work. Makes sense? So registering a tune or registering a new composition with the Copyright Office is a step that you take that doesn't take away from your ownership of that copyright in a way, but it gives you extra layers of protection for that work. So I do recommend that you especially if you're going to record your songs and put it together a project, you have maybe 10 songs and you're going to do that, I recommend that you register with the Copyright Office. But that it's not a necessity for you to own the copyright of your original works if they're expressed in a tangible manner. Make sense? The protection that you get with the registration with the Copyright Office, first of all, it's an infringement. So if someone infringes our copyright or try to infringe that, you are protected by law, right? So, and it's an interesting thing the way the Copyright Office works, because when you register a new work with them, they're not going to dispute that. They're not going to say, "Oh, this is not your original work." If you file all the forms accordingly, they will say, "Okay, your work is registered." Unless someone else claims that work, it's already registered there. So it's basically on a dispute basis that things are going to occur. So that's why I think it's important to register, because then you have that trail of when you did that process, what the tune is, what the material is, and all that, so you can protect yourself in the future. But again, the basic copyright starts when an original work is expressed in a tangible form.
Which would mean if I printed out lyrics to a song of mine, is that basically, that's copyright? Yeah. So best case scenario would be really cool if your song was great enough that somebody did try to steal it. That would be great, right? That'd be really cool. Like I always that's a dream of mine. That'd be kind of awesome. And in that case, I would definitely need to have registered the copyright with the Copyright Office so that I would win if it were to come down to a legal situation. Yeah.
Can you guys speak a little bit about PROs and why they're important?
Okay. So do you guys know what pros are? Yes? Performing rights organizations, right? They help you collect, basically this is like just in plain format. They help you collect royalties for your work, for your music, performing rights. When we talk about performance, sometimes we get confused about the idea of live performance. It's not only live performance. Every time your music gets played, either on radio or online, that is considered a performance of your music. So the performing rights organizations help you to track when your music's being performed, and then collect the royalties and pass that to you and or your publisher, basically. And the three main ones are ASCAP, BMI, and CSAC, but there are others available as well, and you just need to affiliate with them and register your works with them. You need to pick one. You can't be part of more than one to register your works, and it really depends on your preference. They have different pricing. They have different resources that can offer, and I think it's a good idea to do that if you're releasing tunes, because it's a way for you to organize the catalog within a pro, and also by being affiliated with the pro, we're going to get access to a bunch of different resources. So if you just go to their website, you're going to see things that they offer, like they offer workshops like this. There are a lot of educational resources available. So there are a lot of different things that you can get in addition to the collection of royalties by being affiliated with a pro. So I highly recommend that you do so. And again, it's not expensive at all for you to do that.
Can we take a minute and give an applause for our wonderful speakers? Thank you so much.